All right, so adding to the discussion of scientific foreknowledge and things that the Bible has said all along that science comes along later and realizes has always been true, one of the things that came to my mind was the mitochondrial Eve hypothesis, where basically that was in the 1980s. Some genetic scientists began to look into the DNA studies. If you recall, Charles Darwin kind of brought in the idea of evolution, and with that came a belief that different groups, different races, different peoples evolved separately in different parts of the world, and that we weren't all connected as one people and as one race. But within that study of the mitochondrial Eve hypothesis, those scientists concluded that based on our DNA, we are all actually connected, and we come from the same single source. And what's interesting to me about that is the fact that the scriptures have always stated. In fact, there's a verse there in Acts chapter 17, verse 26, that says, "And hath made of one blood all nations of men for to dwell on all the face of the earth." And the Bible has stated from the beginning that we're all connected as one people, and that's what science came around and proved. Fascinating to me.
I agree. I think that's very fascinating. And I just want to point out one correction to what I said earlier. I mentioned that man discovered the paths in the sea, the currents in the sea. I said it was in the 1400s, and we looked it up. It was actually in the 1800s. I think it was Matthew Fontaine Murray, father of oceanography, discovered these currents, and it's even more recent than we thought. So in the 1800s, whereas the Bible said there are paths in the sea thousands of years in the Old Testament, thousands of years before Matthew Fontaine Murray was around. So I just want to point out that correction.
The foreknowledge is staggering when you think about the evidence. Even as we think about scientific thought and the rules of science and what defines science, and those even the fundamental principles of science of time, force, action, space, and matter. And Herbert Spencer in the mid-1800s proposed that idea, and that's kind of been the fundamental practice of using those five elements to use in the scientific method. We have those in the first verse of the Bible. In Genesis chapter 1, we see the beginning and we see God's power. It says, in the beginning, that gives us time. God, we have the force. Created is an action. The heavens, space, and then ultimately the earth, matter. How did Moses, thousands of years before a British philosopher and biologist, Spencer, know that? How could he have known that? He didn't have laboratories to do all this testing. All he had was a revelation from God. And that shows us the power of God's creation and God's mind, and that His ways are higher than our ways, and His ways are beyond finding out. And though we don't find every single answer to every single theory or every single idea of man, we have enough answers. And in the very first verse of the book that we're examining and trying to come to a conclusion about, we see those five accepted fundamentals of science. It's amazing.
That's powerful.
Very powerful.